Secret of the Mimic trailer just finally released last week, and I have some theories about it. The first is about the hand unit-like voice we hear in the trailer.
So let me explain the situation.
What I immediately noticed about the voice is although time-accurate technology in FNaF aren't always a thing to really focus on when it comes to theorizing, 1979 seems very early for an AI voice like hand unit to exist. I mean, think about it. Hand unit, dread unit, tutorial unit, or whatever you want to call it, as we see in the games that take place later in the timeline, is some sort of much more advanced AI voice than what would have probably existed that early in Fazbear Entertainment's existence. But then I also noticed that his voice sounds different from hand unit.
Thank you for being a valued member of the Fazbear team.
You can call me hand unit.
And it is less robotic and much more like a person just reading lines, which I doubt is just bad acting, considering Andy Field, who voices hand unit's previous work, is much more likely that this character is an actual person employed by Fazbear Entertainment and whose likeness was also later used for hand unit. I even believe that I know the identity of this character, because in the story The Mimic, which is where the Mimic was first introduced, it explains how Edwin Murray built the Mimic for his son, David, to play with. But after David was killed, it continued mimicking him, so Edwin took out his anger of seeing this machine copy his dead son's actions, lashed out, and beat the Mimic to a state of almost disrepair, and unknowingly also made the Mimic mimic this very same violent behavior. And after a time skip in this story, Fazbear Entertainment sends out a team to Edwin's factory to retrieve the Mimic. And during that part of the story, there is this interaction. Ron, a balding man with a beer belly, had waved a vague hand and said, Edwin Murray left that place in quite a state when he disappeared a few months ago. The property reverted to Fazbear Entertainment due to a breach of contract. This message is very similar to, and could be the same message that was actually recorded and left for us that we hear in the Secret of the Mimic trailer.
One of our contractors, Edwin Murray, has gone missing, leaving our property abandoned in his warehouse.
But hey, that's just one of my theories. And that theory, along with the next ones, kind of rely on the Tales games theory being true for some of the backing evidence, which if you don't know, is the theories that all of the Tales from the Pizzaplex books are actually canon to the game's continuity. And I, along with a bunch of other people in the community, believe that it is. Especially in recent times, as in a charity stream, Dawko was given access to an early update of 5 Laps at Freddy's, which had a billboard advertising the Hug Robot Vacuum, made by Murray Co., seemingly confirming Edwin Murray's existence in the games. Then just a few weeks later, Steelwell released the most recent update to Help Wanted 2, which not only served as a teaser for Secret of the Mimic, but also had a Tiger Rock plushie in it, which again tied into the Mimic story, as in that it was David's favorite toy. And on top of that, we directly hear Edwin Murray being referenced by his full name in the Secret of the Mimic trailer.
Edwin Murray. Edwin Murray. Edwin Murray.
Which does not happen with any other character in the games. Even Willaiam Afton is only referred to as Mr. Afton during the opening of Sister Location.
With all due respect, those aren't the design choices we were curious about, Mr. Afton.
And Henry isn't even directly referenced besides the HRY 223 tapes and the Pizzeria Simulator Insanity ending. But this theory in particular is a bit more reliant on Tales games, as in the Mimic story, Edwin is both living and working alone in the factory after the passing of his wife, and his only company working there would have been his son David. But in the trailer, we see workplace safety signage that would have only made sense if he had employees. That leads me to believe that there is a possibility that Fazbear Entertainment had already sent workers there to put up signage and possibly continue Edwin's work in the factory after he disappeared. But then they ran into the Mimic, and that's where they had some issues, which is supported by the fact that in the Mimic story, there's a part where we follow a team that is going to Edwin's factory to retrieve the Mimic for Fazbear. And that team learns that there was a previous team sent to retrieve the Mimic, but they were brutally killed by the Mimic's violent behavior. It is possible that this team was originally just going to Edwin's factory to continue his work on mascots for Fazbear, as I said before, but just so happened to learn about the Mimic before being killed. And this also ties into my next theory of who the protagonist is, because in every FNaF game so far, who we are playing has been a lore-relevant character, with us playing as Michael Afton in the first 6 games, Cassie in Ruin, and then her father in Help Wanted 2, who seems to be one of the bullies who helped put the crying child in Fredbear's mouth, known as Bonnie Bro. But if our protagonist in Secret of the Mimic is lore-relevant, who could they be this early in the timeline? Michael Afton would be far too young, as well as the other bullies, but this game definitely seems to be a direct sequel to the Mimic story, and as I said before, in that story, Fazbear sent 2 teams to Edwin's factory and they were both killed. So why would they just send in one person next? Unless we are important to Fazbear and someone who knows a lot of important things, someone like Willaiam Afton, or Henry Emily. And if it was Henry, that could kind of make sense, because he was the person in the beginning who was the engineer for most of the innovations that Fazbear made. But there is something else from the books that makes me believe otherwise, as in the books it tells us that Edwin made the mimic for his son to play with, so it could mimic what he was doing to play along with him while Edwin was working on animatronics and mascots for Fazbear. But the trailer tells us that he made the mimic for Fazbear, which seems like Fazbear is lying to us, as they have many times before, in stealing the mimic. And only a few people would want to steal the mimic. I doubt Henry would be on board with it, but who else could be the person that not only decided on this whole mission to steal the mimic and would also have the power to send it himself in alone to get it? Willaiam Afton. It would make sense he would have the authority and power to go in alone, and definitely the ego to think that he would survive without anyone else's help. And this also ties into one other small theory I have, because in the trailer we can see what seems to be a body stuffed in a mascot costume, likely by the mimic. So if Willaiam Afton saw this while in Edwin's factory, there's a possibility that he mimicked the mimic during the missing children's incident when he stuffed them in the suits. Then the glitch trap virus, which is likely the Mimic 1 program in the much far future of the FNaF timeline, copied William's murders and would then be a loop of sorts, and it's kind of ironic that the same Mimic program inspired itself. So basically, just from this trailer, I think that Hand Unit was a real person employed by Fazbear called Ron, and that Fazbear Entertainment stole the mimic from Edwin, and that we are going to play as Willaiam Afton in Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic. But that was just my first ever FNaF Theory video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe, and please tell me any theories that you have in the comments.
Holy shit, it's Freddy Fazbear. FNaF.